Ah, welcome, welcome. Gather round the fire, my friends. The world is full of Christmas tales, each as magical as the season itself. Let me share a few with you, some heartwarming, some mysterious, but all brimming with holiday cheer. Now, settle in and let's begin. Picture this, lads and lasses. The year is 1914, and the world is tangled up in one of the messiest wars you can imagine. There we were, trenches dug into the frozen earth, soldiers huddled like sardines, and the chill nipping at our noses. Now, I wasn't there myself, mind you, but I've heard the tale more times than I've counted snowflakes on a winter's morning. Let me tell you about the Christmas when enemies decided, to hell with fighting. It began on Christmas Eve, the air thick with tension, though not the kind that makes you want to duck for cover. German lads started singing Stille Nacht, their voices floating across the no-man's land like a lullaby. The British boys, not to be outdone, hollered back with Silent Night. Imagine that. Guns silent, and carols dancing between the trenches like they were at a proper holiday concert. One brave soul from the German side, bless him, popped his head out first. He waved a white cloth like he was surrendering to Christmas itself, and soon enough, British lads were peeking over their trench walls, curious as cats. Slowly, carefully, they climbed out, trudging through the mud like it was the first time they'd felt solid ground in years. Next thing you know, they're meeting in the middle, shaking hands and exchanging cigarettes like old pals. A few brought out tins of biscuits or chocolate, which might as well have been gold in those days. One fella found a football. Where he got it, I'll never know. And suddenly, there's a proper match happening on a battlefield. Mud flying, boots slipping, and laughter echoing where once there was only the roar of artillery. Oh, there were some who grumbled about it, the officers mostly, because they had to keep things proper. But for that one day, war felt a bit less like hell and more like a Christmas miracle. Men who'd been aiming to shoot each other were sharing stories, showing photos of their sweethearts, and even swapping little trinkets as if they were at a Christmas market. When the sun dipped and the frost thickened, they shook hands again, wished each other well, and returned to their trenches. By the next day, the war was back on, sadly, but the memory of that truce stayed with them. It was proof, I reckon, that even in the darkest times, there's a bit of light if you're willing to look for it. So, remember that story when your turkey burns or your presents don't quite hit the mark, because if soldiers can find Christmas spirit in the middle of a war, surely the rest of us can manage a merry little Christmas. Now, pass the mulled wine, will you? My throat's as dry as an old boot. Let me spin you a tale about a little adventure from 2015 when treasure wasn't buried in pirate coves but tucked away in the most unexpected places. Our story begins in a dusty attic where the Clark family, ordinary as jam on toast, was cleaning up before selling their old countryside home. There was Dad, muttering about spiders like they were plotting his demise, Mom supervising as if the attic were Buckingham Palace, and the kids, Emma and Jake, complaining loud enough to wake the dead. But then Jake, the youngest and nosiest of the bunch, stumbled on an old creaky chest. "Look what I found," he shouted, nearly toppling over as he pried the lid open with a crowbar he definitely wasn't supposed to have. Inside were stacks of letters, photographs, and a peculiar metal box, sealed tight with a combination lock. "Probably junk," Dad grumbled, already itching to chuck it in the bin. But Emma, sharp as a tack, and twice as stubborn, insisted they keep it. "You don't just throw away history, Dad," she said, hands on her hips like she owned the place. Curiosity gnawed at them, and soon the family was sitting cross-legged in the living room, flipping through old letters. They discovered tales of an ancestor named Captain Theodore Clark, a merchant-turned-adventurer who'd supposedly hidden a fortune during World War II. The metal box, they figured, had to be the key, or at least a piece of the puzzle. Now, opening the lock was no easy task. Mom suggested the obvious, birthdays, anniversaries. But when those didn't work, Emma decided they needed to dig deeper. She pored over the letters like a detective, piecing together clues from Captain Clark's cryptic writings. "The numbers are in the stars," one line read, which led to a lot of stargazing and head-scratching. After days of decoding and one particularly heated argument over whether or not Theodore was being dramatic on purpose, they cracked it. The code wasn't numbers at all, but the names of constellations, written in a sequence. Emma punched them in, the lock clicked, and the family held their breath. Inside the box wasn't gold or jewels, but something far more valuable. Captain Clark's journals detailing his travels, maps, and photographs of places long gone. Among them was a deed to a small patch of land in Cornwall, which turned out to be worth a pretty penny once they dug into it. But it wasn't just the treasure that mattered. For the first time in years, the Clarks had worked together, laughed, argued, and discovered a sense of adventure they didn't know they had. As Emma put it, we found something way cooler than treasure. We found us. And that, my friends, is how an old chest turned one ordinary family into modern-day explorers. So the next time you're tempted to toss something dusty, think again. You never know what treasures might be waiting for you. Oh, now, this one is a mysterious one. Let me tell you the story, one that still gets passed around in Greenfield every Christmas. It's about the year of the anonymous caroler, back in 1984, when something a little mysterious and a whole lot magical happened in this small town. It all began on a crisp December evening, right as the town's clock struck 9. The streets were quiet, the homes warm with the glow of Christmas lights, and then, from nowhere, a voice filled the air. Not just any voice, mind you, but one that was as clear and beautiful as if it had been lifted straight from a Christmas hymn book. It was "O Holy Night," and the sound was so moving, so perfect, that it sent chills down anyone who happened to be listening. But here's the catch. No one could see who was singing. They stepped out of their homes, searching the dark streets for the singer. But there was no one there, not a single person, just footprints in the snow, stretching from one end of the street to the other, before they disappeared near the old church. That didn't stop the people of Greenfield. No, they were more curious than ever. The next night, they stood on their porches, hoping for another song. And sure enough, at exactly 9 o'clock, the voice returned. This time it was Silent Night, sung with as much beauty as the night before. But once again, the singer was nowhere to be found. Only the footprints leading down the street, only to vanish again. By the third night, the town was buzzing. People had come from every corner, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious caroler. Some thought it might be a professional singer, secretly coming into town to give the place a surprise performance. Others whispered it could be something supernatural, a ghost or angel sent to spread Christmas cheer. But no matter what they thought, no one could ever figure out where the voice was coming from. The songs kept coming. The first Noel, hark, the herald angels sing, each one more beautiful than the last. But the identity of the singer, a complete mystery. Then came Christmas Eve. The whole town gathered in the streets, waiting for what they all hoped would be the final performance. And sure enough, as the clock struck 9, the voice came again, this time singing, "O come all ye faithful." The people joined in, their voices blending with the carolers, and for a moment, it felt like the whole town was one big choir singing together in harmony. When the song ended, the footprints appeared once more, leading to the church. But this time, they didn't disappear. They stopped right at the church doors. With bated breath, the townsfolk gathered around, waiting for someone to open it and reveal the singer's identity. But when the door swung open, there was no one inside, no singer, no trace of anyone. Just the quiet, peaceful stillness of the church, with candles flickering on the altar. And that was it. The caroler never returned, and the mystery was never solved. Some say it was an angel. Others think it was just a local with a beautiful voice who wanted to spread some holiday joy. But no matter who the caroler was, that year they gave Greenfield a Christmas gift they'd never forget. The mystery of the anonymous caroler. Now, this here is a story you won't hear every day, and it's not your typical Christmas cheer. I'll tell you that much. It's about a man named Hans Trapp, a figure whose shadow loomed over the holidays like a dark cloud. You see, Hans wasn't the jolly fellow you'd want to see coming down your chimney. No. This man was someone far more terrifying, someone you'd want to steer clear of, especially during Christmas time. Hans Trapp lived in the Alsace region of France back in the Middle Ages, and he was a man with quite the reputation. He was rich, powerful, and feared by all who knew him. But he didn't get that way by being kind and generous. No, Hans was a greedy, ruthless man, always looking for more land, more power, and more wealth. He was so caught up in his own ambition that he made deals with the devil himself, or so the stories say. Eventually, of course, the church couldn't overlook his evil ways. They cast him out, stripped him of his land, and sent him off to the dark woods, far from the comforts of his castle. Now, most folks would have given up and gone quietly, but not Hans Trapp. Oh no, he wasn't done yet. He was about to change Christmas forever. In those dark woods, with nothing but the silence of the trees for company, Hans Trapp took on a new terrifying identity. Instead of the wealth and power he once craved, he now sought to spread fear. He fashioned a terrifying mask, donned a dark cloak, and began to stalk the woods, waiting for the chance to snatch up children who misbehaved. Yes, you heard me right. While St. Nicholas was busy giving gifts and spreading joy, Hans Trapp was out there lurking in the shadows, looking for naughty children to take. Every Christmas, he would show up in the dead of night, and rather than a sack full of toys, he carried something far more sinister, the threat of abduction. It's said that if you wandered too far from home, especially if you've been misbehaving, Hans Trapp would be waiting for you in the forest. His glowing eyes and wicked grin the last thing you'd ever see. One particular story sticks with me about a young boy who, despite all the warnings, decided to wander out into the woods one Christmas Eve. He didn't believe in Hans Trapp, you see, thought it was just an old tale meant to keep kids in line. But when he strayed too far, he heard the crunch of footsteps behind him. When he turned, there stood Hans, tall and terrifying, his face hidden behind that horrible mask. The boy ran for his life, but it was no use. The next morning, they found him, cold and lifeless in the snow. Some say it was Hans Trapp who took him, just as he had taken so many others before. And just like that, the legend of Hans Trapp grew. Some say he still haunts the woods to this day, waiting for the next child who doesn't heed the warnings. While St. Nicholas brings joy and cheer, Hans Trapp waits in the shadows, a reminder that not all Christmas legends are filled with warmth and happiness. So, be careful out there, my friends. There's always a dark figure in the woods, watching, waiting for those who wander too far. Oh, this is a little favorite of mine. Let me tell you a tale that's a little less spooky, but just as full of mischief, coming all the way from the cold, windswept land of Iceland. This is the story of the Yule Lads, a group of characters who make St. Nicholas look downright tame in comparison. You see, the Yule Lads aren't your ordinary holiday visitors. Oh no, these lads are a rowdy bunch, and their visits start way before Christmas even begins. They've got a tradition that goes back centuries, and it's full of surprises, some a bit cheeky, others downright naughty. There are 13 of them, and they don't all show up at once. Oh no, each one arrives on a different night, starting on December 12th, and they've got a way of making their presence known, whether you like it or not. Now, these Yule Lads don't come bearing gifts of candy or toys like St. Nicholas. Instead, they come with their own brand of mischief. Take the first one, for example, Stekjar Stour, or Sheepcoat Clyde. This fellow's got a love for sheep, and not in a way you might think. Oh no, he spends his time trying to steal milk from the sheep, causing all sorts of trouble for the farmers. Then there's Giljagar, or Gully Gawk, who sneaks into the valleys to steal milk too. It seems there's a bit of a theme going on here, doesn't it? But don't think they're all about stealing milk. No, they've got all sorts of tricks up their sleeves. There's Stuffer, Stubby, who's short but mighty, always sneaking into the kitchens to snatch the best bits of food. And then Thvorus Lakir, or Spoon Licker, who, as you might guess, licks spoons clean. Strange, right? But that's the thing with the Yule Lads. They've got all sorts of odd habits and ways of causing mischief. Some of them are a little more troublesome than others, though. Take Potaskifil, Pot Scraper, for example. He sneaks around at night, scraping the leftovers out of the pots. Or Askus Lakir, Bowl Licker, who likes to sneak under the table and lick the bowls that have been left out. These lads weren't exactly the kind of visitors you'd want arriving on your doorstep, but they certainly made the holidays interesting. And then there's Herdaskellir, Door Slammer, who, as his name suggests, runs around slamming doors in the dead of night, waking up the whole house with a loud bang. Not exactly the best way to spread Christmas cheer, huh? But you can't say the Yule Lads don't know how to make an entrance. Now, despite all their mischievous ways, the Yule Lads aren't all bad. You see, they've got a soft side too. On Christmas Eve, if you've been good, they'll leave small gifts in your shoes. Yes, you heard that right. You see, in Iceland, children leave their shoes by the window, and if they've been good, a Yule Lad will drop a little treat in them. But if you've been naughty, well, you might just find a rotten potato in there instead. The Yule Lad's antics carry on through the 12 days of Christmas, each one coming with their own little prank or trick. But by New Year's Eve, they've all gone back to their mountain caves, leaving behind only the memories of their mischievous ways. So, while St. Nicholas might be all about spreading joy, the Yule lads, well, they're more about causing a bit of chaos and keeping everyone on their toes. They remind us that Christmas isn't just about gifts and treats, it's also about fun, surprises, and a bit of mischief to keep things interesting. Just remember to leave your shoes out and hope you've been good enough to get a treat and not a rotten potato. Do you want to hear a heartwarming tale? It's the kind of story that'll make you believe in the magic of this season and how sometimes a little kindness can work wonders. This is the story of the Christmas layaway miracle. It all started in a bustling store, one of those big department chains where folks are in and out, grabbing their holiday deals. It was the kind of place where everyone was busy ticking off their shopping lists, fighting through the crowds to get the best bargains. In the middle of all this holiday chaos, there was a woman, a single mother named Sarah, who was just trying to make sure her kids had a good Christmas. Sarah had been putting things on layaway for weeks, scrimping and saving every penny she could. She had the perfect gifts picked out, things her kids would love. But like so many, money was tight. She didn't have enough to pay off everything by Christmas. Still, she kept her head up, knowing that every little bit she paid off brought her closer to getting those presents under the tree. One snowy December afternoon, Sarah walked into the store, ready to make her last payment. She had scraped together what she could, but the balance still wasn't quite enough. She approached the counter, feeling the weight of the situation on her shoulders. She wasn't sure how she was going to make it work, but she was determined. But as she stood there, the cashier gave her a smile that didn't quite match the usual busy holiday routine. She asked Sarah to hold on for a moment and disappeared into the back. Sarah stood there confused, wondering if something had gone wrong. Then, out of nowhere, the manager came up to her with a big smile. "You won't believe it," he said, "but someone just paid off the remainder of your balance." Sarah froze. "What do you mean?" she asked. "It's all taken care of. Your layaway is completely paid off. Someone came in and cleared the balance, including the little bit you had left." A mix of disbelief and joy swept over Sarah. Who did this?" she asked, glancing around the store. The manager just shrugged. "It was anonymous. All we know is that they paid for it and said, 'Merry Christmas.'" Sarah's eyes welled up with tears as she realized what had just happened. The kindness of a stranger, someone who knew nothing about her but saw a little extra room in their heart for someone else, had made it possible for her to give her kids the Christmas they deserved. She didn't know who this person was, but she was filled with gratitude, overwhelmed by the kindness of their gesture. That was the Christmas layaway miracle, the story of how one person's generosity made an incredible difference in a mother's life. It wasn't just about the presents under the tree, though. It was about the reminder that even in the hustle and bustle of the holiday season, there's still room for goodness, for unexpected acts of kindness, and for the magic that only Christmas can bring. And who knows? Maybe that person who paid off the layaway was someone who, just like Sarah, knew the power of giving. Sometimes you don't have to know someone's story to make a difference in their life. You just have to open your heart and make a Christmas miracle happen. So this one's a tale that'll warm your heart and remind you that the holiday spirit can sometimes work in the most unexpected ways. It's the story of The Missing Star, and it takes us back to the 1950s. a time when things were simpler, and Christmas was all about family, tradition, and a bit of magic in the air. It happened in a small, cozy town not too far from the big city where everyone knew each other and the local church bell rang every Sunday. The streets were lined with old brick houses, their windows glowing with the warm light of Christmas. Folks were bustling about, getting ready for the holiday season, hanging wreaths, setting up their trees, and wrapping presents. But there was one thing missing, something that had always been part of the town's holiday tradition: the star on top of the church's Christmas tree. Now, every year, the whole town would gather around the tree, its branches heavy with ornaments, tinsel, and a beautiful shining star at the very top. It was a symbol of hope, of light in the dark winter nights, and of the spirit of Christmas. But this year, the star was nowhere to be found. It had vanished, and no one could figure out why or where it had gone. The townspeople were worried. The tree just didn't feel complete without it. How could they celebrate Christmas properly without the star? So they all did what any small town would do. They pitched in to help. They searched high and low, asking everyone from the young children to the elderly grandmothers if they knew where the star had gone. But no one had a clue. It seemed the missing star had become the mystery of the season. Enter young Tommy, a bright-eyed boy with a heart full of hope. He had grown up with the star shining brightly every Christmas, and he knew how important it was to the town. Tommy loved Christmas more than anything and wasn't about to let this holiday go by without the star on top of the tree. So, one snowy afternoon, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Tommy wandered around town, talking to people, asking if they'd seen anything strange. Then, as he was walking past the local toy shop, something caught his eye. It was a small, old-fashioned box tucked away on a dusty shelf. And what did he see inside? A familiar glimmer of gold. There, resting in the box, was the star, the very same one that had adorned the top of the tree for as long as anyone could remember. Tommy couldn't believe his eyes. He rushed to the shopkeeper, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Jenkins, and asked, "Mr. Jenkins, where did this star come from? It's the one from the church tree?" Mr. Jenkins smiled, a twinkle in his eye. "Ah, well, Tommy, you see, it was meant to be a surprise. I've been holding on to it for a little while, keeping it safe, until the right moment." Tommy was baffled. "But why?" he asked. "Well," Mr. Jenkins chuckled, "sometimes you need a little reminder that Christmas isn't just about the tree or the gifts. It's about the spirit we carry with us all year long. This year, I thought it might be nice for you and your friends to go on a little search. It's a way of bringing the whole town together and reminding us all that we're all part of something bigger." Tommy's face lit up with understanding. He rushed back to the church where the townspeople were waiting anxiously. When he walked in holding the star, everyone cheered. The church bell rang out, and the townspeople gathered around the tree, ready to put the star back where it belonged. As the star was carefully placed on top of the tree, a hush fell over the crowd. The tree sparkled with newfound brilliance, and everyone felt that familiar warmth in their hearts. That year, the star wasn't just a decoration. It was a symbol of the kindness and community that held the town together, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always a little light waiting to guide you home. And so, the Christmas of 1950 ended up being one of the most memorable of all. It wasn't just because the star was back on the tree, but because the people of the town had rediscovered the true meaning of Christmas: family, love, and the joy of coming together to celebrate what truly matters. Do you know what I like? Stories that become as big as a city itself. One full of sparkle, tradition, and a little bit of magic. And it could only happen in New York City. Let's go back to 1931, to a time when the world was still recovering from hard years, but the spirit of Christmas was as bright as ever. You see, every Christmas, Rockefeller Center in Manhattan becomes home to one of the most iconic Christmas trees in the world. But in 1931, it was a little different. The Great Depression had its grip on the nation, and things weren't easy. People were struggling, and hope felt like something hard to hold on to. But Christmas always had a way of bringing people together, reminding them of the light that still shone even in the darkest times. That year, the city decided to put up a Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. But it wasn't anything like the grand, towering spectacle we know today. In fact, it started with a simple idea: a tree to bring cheer to the workers who were building the center. These men, laborers working long, hard hours on what was to become one of the most famous landmarks in the world, had little to look forward to beyond the end of the workday, but they needed a reminder that despite the hard work and tough times, there was still a reason to celebrate. So, they did what any group of people might do in the spirit of Christmas. They found a tree. It wasn't much at first, just a humble 20-foot tall spruce standing in the middle of the construction site. But when the workers decided to put it up and decorate it with whatever they could find, it became something more than just a tree. It became a symbol of resilience, a glimmer of hope in a world that needed it more than ever. On Christmas Eve, the workers gathered around the tree, their faces lit by the soft glow of candles and makeshift ornaments. It wasn't the big, extravagant celebration we think of today, but it was enough to fill their hearts with warmth. And little did they know that humble tree would spark something much bigger than they could have imagined. Word of the tree spread quickly. People in the city heard about it and began to come by to see the modest holiday decoration. They didn't come in droves at first, just a few curious passers-by, but soon enough, more and more people started to show up. It wasn't long before the tree became a symbol, not just for the workers, but for the whole city, a symbol of hope, of joy, and of the strength of community, even in hard times. The next year, the tree was bigger and the celebrations more grand. The tradition began to grow, and with each passing year, the Rockefeller Christmas tree became a part of the holiday fabric of New York City, drawing millions of visitors from around the world. But it all started with that small, simple tree in 1931, put up by a group of workers who just needed a reminder of the joy that Christmas could bring. It wasn't about the size of the tree or the decorations. It was about the meaning behind it, the way it brought people together, gave them hope, and reminded them that even when times are tough, there's always something worth celebrating. And so every year since then, the tree stands tall at Rockefeller Center, a shining beacon of Christmas spirit. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest traditions begin in the most unexpected ways. So the next time you see that big, beautiful tree, think back to 1931, to the workers who put up that first tree, and remember how a little holiday spirit can make the world feel just a little brighter. Well, now that we've talked about the magic of Christmas traditions, let me tell you the story of one that has echoed through the ages, the story of Silent Night. It's a song that's sung in churches and homes all over the world, a tune that's as peaceful as a winter's night. But did you know that its true origin is as humble and heartwarming as the song itself? It was 1818 in a small Austrian village called Oberndorf, nestled in the Alps, where the song came to life. Now, at that time, the church organ in St. Nicholas Church had broken down. A problem for sure, especially when the church was planning its Christmas Eve service. The town's priest, Father Joseph Moore, was concerned. He had written a beautiful poem for Christmas, something he felt would bring peace and joy to everyone who heard it. But without the organ, how could it be performed properly? Father Moore wasn't one to give up easily, though. So he went to his friend, Franz Xaver Gruber, who was the local school teacher and organist. He asked Gruber if he could set the poem to music, something simple that could be sung without the need for the grand organ. Gruber thought it over for a moment, and in just a few hours, he had composed a melody that perfectly matched the words Father Moore had written. That Christmas Eve, with no organ to play, Father Moore and Gruber stood before the congregation, and for the very first time, Silent Night was sung. It was just the two of them, Father Moore's voice and Gruber's guitar accompanying him, filling the church with the quiet serenity of the song. What's truly remarkable is that even though this was the song's humble debut, the magic of Silent Night was already there. The simple, peaceful melody and the words about the calm of that holy night touched something deep in the hearts of those who heard it. It didn't take long before it spread beyond that little church, first to the nearby towns, then across Austria, and eventually the world. The song's message of peace, love, and the silent beauty of Christmas resonated with so many people regardless of where they were. And what started as a simple solution to a problem, no organ, no big ceremony, became one of the most beloved Christmas carols ever written. In the years that followed, Silent Night was translated into dozens of languages and sung by countless voices in churches, concert halls, and homes. Its message of hope and tranquility still rings true today, just as it did back in 1818, when it was first sung by two friends in a small church, facing a challenge, but finding in the midst of it something even more beautiful than they had imagined. Ah, we're on quite a journey through time, aren't we? From the humble beginnings of Silent Night, which first filled the air with peace and joy back in 1818, let's jump forward a bit to a time when that same spirit of goodwill and generosity was soaring high in the skies. I'm talking about Operation Christmas Drop, a story that brings a whole new meaning to Christmas miracles. And this one, well, it's not just about the calm of the night, but the reaching out to those in need, no matter how far away they are. Now, picture it. 1952, the holiday season, and the world was still healing after the turbulence of World War II. The kindness of people like Father Moore and Gruber, who shared their song of peace, wasn't just confined to quiet churches. It was spreading, growing, becoming something bigger than anyone could imagine. So over in the Pacific Ocean, where the island territories of the United States were scattered like gems in the sea, military personnel stationed in places like Guam, the Philippines, and other remote areas were brainstorming how they could bring a little Christmas cheer to those who had little in the way of material comforts. But instead of sending more presents or sending people in big decorated cars. They came up with something that would spread the joy of Christmas in a way that would last. Operation Christmas Drop. This wasn't about fancy wrapping or towering trees. No, this was about flying over remote islands, far from the hustle and bustle, and dropping packages of supplies, everything from food to clothing to small gifts. The idea was simple, yet incredibly powerful. Share what you can with those who need it most. Imagine it. Planes soaring high above the Pacific, their engines roaring, but their mission pure. Delivering Christmas to islands where many had never even heard of the song Silent Night. With each drop, they sent a message of peace, hope, and love to people who needed it most. It wasn't the fancy gifts or the glittering lights that mattered. It was the thought, the spirit, the outreach that made it truly special. Operation Christmas Drop was born from humble beginnings, but the impact? Oh, the impact was far-reaching, touching people around the world and making Christmas just a little bit brighter for those who needed it most. It's a beautiful reminder, really, that the true spirit of Christmas doesn't depend on how grand or perfect everything is. It's about the willingness to share, to give, and to bring a little bit of light to someone else's world, even from way up high in the sky. Operation Christmas Drop carries on year after year, keeping that jolly spirit alive. And who knows, maybe when you hear the song, you'll also remember the folks flying across the world sharing that same magic of Christmas, wrapped up in a parachute and dropped from a plane. All right, let's take a little turn, my friend, as we dive into a different kind of holiday story. This one's got a twist, a bit of humor mixed with a pinch of holiday stress, something we all know too well around Christmas time. This is the story of The Frozen Turkey from 1995, and oh boy, it's going to be a ride. It starts like any typical holiday. You know the scene. Families running around, cooking, cleaning, making sure everything is just right for the big meal. But for the Harris family, things weren't exactly going as smoothly as they'd hoped. It was Christmas Eve, and the Harris family had been planning the perfect dinner for weeks. The tree was up, the presents wrapped, and the house was filled with the smell of Christmas cookies baking in the oven. But there was one little thing that had slipped through the cracks. The turkey, or more specifically, the frozen turkey. Now imagine this. It's Christmas Eve. Everyone's gathered around, all set to get started on the big meal, when someone, let's call him Uncle Dave, looks at the freezer and says, did anyone remember to thaw the turkey? The room goes silent. The turkey, still frozen solid, was sitting there like a brick of ice. Now, normally you'd think, well, we'll just pop it in the microwave and be fine. But no, this turkey was no ordinary frozen bird. It was a 20-pounder, and microwaving it wasn't exactly an option. Panic set in. There was no way they could serve a frozen turkey to the whole family. But that's when Aunt Carol, always the quick thinker, suggested something that only she would have come up with. The boiling water method. No, not putting the turkey in the water, but rather pouring boiling water over it bit by bit to help it thaw faster. And let me tell you, if there was ever a method that seemed like it could either save the day or end in complete disaster, this was it. So there they were, the whole family in a mad scramble, running around the kitchen, boiling pots of water, trying to thaw the turkey as quickly as possible. The clock was ticking, and dinner time was drawing near. The kids were running around laughing. The adults were panicking. But through it all, there was a sense of urgency, mixed with good old-fashioned holiday chaos. At one point, Uncle Dave tried to speed up the process by placing the turkey in the sink, surrounded by steaming hot water. But as you can imagine, things didn't quite go as planned. The turkey started to slowly thaw, but in the most dramatic fashion. First it became a soggy mess, and then, just when they thought things couldn't get worse, a bit of the skin started to peel off. Now, they were really in trouble. There was no saving that poor bird, and they were all starting to feel the pressure of Christmas dinner slipping away from their grasp. But then, just as they were about to give up and order pizza, which in hindsight might have been a much more peaceful solution, Aunt Carol had a light bulb moment. She remembered the old standby, the crock pot. If they could just break the turkey into smaller pieces, throw it in the slow cooker, and let it cook on low, it might just work out. And work out it did. By the time the rest of the family had gathered around the table, the turkey wasn't perfect, but it was edible. The crispy golden skin was a distant dream, but it had been cooked through, tender and flavorful. The whole family sat down to a meal that wasn't exactly what they'd planned, but in its own way, it was just perfect for them. The moral of the story: sometimes, no matter how much you plan or how perfect you think things will go, a little holiday chaos is inevitable. But that's okay. Christmas is about family, love, and yes, sometimes even frozen turkeys. After all, who needs a perfectly roasted bird when you have a family that knows how to pull together, laugh, and make the best of things? In the end, they all agreed it was the best Christmas dinner they'd ever had, frozen turkey and all. All right, folks, gather around, because this story is a bit different from what you might expect. It's got a little bit of magic, a touch of Christmas cheer, and of course, a moose. Yes, a moose, but not just any moose. This one has a story to tell. It all started back in 2000 in a small town tucked away in the snowy woods of northern Canada. Now, you'd think a place like that would be peaceful, quiet, and full of the usual Christmas hustle and bustle. But for the Anderson family, something a little more unusual was about to happen. You see, the Andersons lived on a cozy little farm just outside town, where the nearest neighbor was a few miles away. They didn't expect much excitement, especially not around Christmas time. Their tree was up, the lights were twinkling, and they were planning a simple, peaceful holiday. But one snowy afternoon, as the family was inside decorating and preparing for the big day, something outside caught their attention. A rustling in the snow, a soft crunching of twigs underfoot. When they looked outside, their eyes went wide. There, standing at the edge of their property, was a moose. Now, sure, moose weren't exactly uncommon in that part of the world, but this one was different. He wasn't just any moose. This one had something special about him. A large red ribbon was tied around his neck, with a little bell jingling softly in the wind. The Andersons stared in disbelief. "Is that a Christmas moose?" young Emily Anderson asked, wide-eyed, pointing at the creature. "Well, I'll be," her father chuckled, squinting. "It sure looks like it." Curious, they all bundled up in their winter clothes and headed outside, the cold air biting their cheeks, but the excitement of the moment warming their hearts. They walked slowly toward the moose, who didn't seem to mind their presence at all. In fact, he seemed almost festive. His big brown eyes twinkled, and the bell around his neck jingled gently with every step he took. When they got close enough, Emily couldn't resist. She reached out and gently touched the moose's nose, which was cold and wet, but surprisingly soft. The moose gave a little snort, as if he was pleased by the attention. The Andersons weren't sure what to make of it, but they couldn't help but smile. The moment was magical. It was as if the moose had come just to remind them of the joy and wonder of Christmas, of the unexpected surprises that make the season so special. After a while, they returned to the warmth of their home, but the moose stayed nearby, grazing quietly in the snow. Later that evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, there was a sudden knock at the door. Emily opened it, and to her surprise, there was a basket filled with freshly baked treats, cookies, pies, and even a loaf of bread wrapped in a festive red cloth. No note, no explanation, just the gift sitting there on the doorstep. The family had no idea where it came from, but they all agreed that the moose had something to do with it. Maybe it was his way of wishing them a Merry Christmas, or perhaps he had a magical connection to the spirit of giving. From that day on, the Andersons would tell the story of the Christmas moose, how, on one snowy Christmas season, a moose with a red ribbon and a jingling bell appeared at their doorstep, bringing with him not only a touch of holiday wonder, but a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected things bring the most joy. And every year, when Christmas rolled around, they'd hang a red ribbon outside their home, just in case the Christmas moose decided to pay them another visit. Because Christmas, after all, has a funny way of surprising us, sometimes in the most delightful of ways. Let's shift gears again, my friend. This one's a bit more mysterious, a little spooky, but still filled with that Christmas magic we all know and love. It's the story of Saint on the Roof, a tale that'll make you look at Christmas a little differently, and perhaps even leave you wondering if there's more to the holiday than we can see. It happened in 2017 in a little town called Maple Grove. Now, Maple Grove was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, and Christmas was always a big deal. The streets were lined with twinkling lights, wreaths hung on every door, and the sound of Christmas carols filled the air. One particular December night, the Montgomery family was settling in for their usual Christmas Eve routine. The tree was up, the stockings hung with care, and they were just finishing up a late dinner when they heard something unusual. It started as a soft tap on the roof, almost like a footstep, but it was strange. It was too heavy to be the wind and too rhythmic to be anything else. At first, they thought it was just the house settling, but then the tapping grew louder. Tap, tap, tap. Each sound seemed to shake the rafters just a little. The family looked at each other wide-eyed. What in the world was that? Father Montgomery, ever the skeptic, decided to investigate. He grabbed a flashlight and made his way upstairs to the attic, thinking maybe a squirrel had gotten in or a loose piece of roofing was causing the noise. But when he stepped into the attic, there was nothing unusual, just boxes of decorations and old furniture. Then, without warning, a loud bang came from the roof, followed by a deep ho, ho, ho that echoed down the chimney. Then, without warning, a loud bang came from the roof, followed by a deep ho, ho, ho that echoed down the chimney. Father Montgomery froze. Could it be Santa Claus? Impossible. He shook his head and laughed it off. But the tapping continued, and it was growing louder. Something, or someone, was definitely up there. Now, curious But a little nervous, the Montgomery family decided to investigate together. They grabbed a ladder from the garage and propped it against the side of the house, carefully climbing to the roof. As they stepped onto the snow-covered shingles, they were met with an unexpected sight. There, standing in the glow of the Christmas lights, was an older man, dressed not in a red suit, but in a long cloak, white beard flowing in the wind, and eyes twinkling with a mischievous sparkle. He was standing on the roof, holding a large sack over his shoulder, humming softly. The Montgomerys were speechless. "Can we help you?" Mrs. Montgomery finally stammered. The man turned with a smile, his face warm and kind, but there was something undeniably mystical about him. "Just delivering a little something," he said, with a chuckle, winking at the family. "You've all been very good this year, haven't you?" Before they could respond, he lifted his sack and tossed something down their chimney. With a jingle of bells, he gave them one last nod and disappeared into the night, just as quietly as he had come. The Montgomerys stood there, stunned, unsure whether they had imagined the whole thing, but as they climbed down from the roof, they saw the unmistakable shape of a small gift left on their doorstep, a beautifully wrapped box adorned with a red ribbon. They opened it, and inside was a set of custom stockings, each one embroidered with their names. It was a gift they hadn't asked for, but one they would cherish forever. No note, no explanation, just a reminder of the magic that Christmas brings, sometimes in the most unexpected forms. That year, the Montgomerys would tell the story of the saint on the roof. The man who appeared when they least expected it, bringing a little extra holiday cheer and a sprinkle of Christmas magic that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. And every Christmas Eve after that, they would listen a little more carefully for the sound of tapping on the roof, just in case Saint was making his rounds once again, spreading his special kind of holiday spirit to those who truly believed in the magic of Christmas. Ah, another tale for you, and this one's a little different. It's the story of the snowstorm Christmas. And let me tell you, it's one of those stories that reminds you that sometimes Christmas isn't about the perfect presents or the flawless plans. Sometimes it's about making the best of a situation, no matter how unexpected or wild it might seem. It was the winter of 2002, and the O'Malley family had planned the perfect Christmas getaway. They'd rented a cabin up in the mountains just outside a small town to escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life. It was supposed to be a cozy, peaceful retreat, a chance for the family to unwind, relax, and enjoy each other's company. They'd stocked up on food, wrapped their presents with care, and were looking forward to hot cocoa by the fire, sledding down hills, and a classic Christmas feast. But, as you might have guessed, Mother Nature had other plans. It started out as just a light snow, the kind that made everything look like a winter wonderland. The O'Malleys were thrilled. They'd arrived early, unpacked, and were looking forward to their Christmas Eve dinner when the snow began to fall faster and harder. Before long, the peaceful white flakes had turned into a full-blown snowstorm, swirling through the trees and piling up against the cabin. By evening, the storm had become so intense that they could barely see a few feet outside the cabin. The snow was coming down so fast that the road leading back to town had disappeared completely. They were completely cut off. And just like that, their peaceful getaway had turned into something far more dramatic. Now, most families might have panicked. What if we run out of food? What if the power goes out? What if we can't make it back home? But the O'Malley family, well, they had a different approach. Instead of worrying, they took it in stride. After all, they were together, and that was what mattered most. They lit candles, gathered around the fire, and made the best of the situation. The kids played board games, the adults reminisced about old Christmases, and everyone helped with making a makeshift dinner. It wasn't the fancy turkey they had planned for, but the homemade soup and bread they threw together tasted better than anything they could have hoped for. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the little cabin, it was warm, cozy, and filled with laughter. And as the night went on, something even more magical happened. The storm outside began to create a beautiful, serene quiet, the kind of stillness that you only get when everything is blanketed in snow. They woke up on Christmas morning to a world that looked like a snow globe. Everything covered in a thick layer of snow, the trees heavy with frost, and the air so fresh it almost sparkled. The power had gone out overnight, but it didn't matter. The O'Malleys had everything they needed right there in that little cabin, each other, a warm fire, and the kind of Christmas memories that can't be bought in a store. By the time the snowstorm finally cleared up, the family had grown even closer. They didn't just survive the storm, they thrived in it, finding joy in the unexpected, embracing the challenge, and making Christmas even more special than they ever could have imagined. When the snow finally stopped and the roads were cleared, the O'Malleys packed up and headed home. But they left with a new appreciation for the true meaning of Christmas. It's not about the decorations, the presents, or the perfect holiday plans. It's about being together, making the best of what you have, and finding joy in the moments that come unexpectedly. And every year after that, when they looked at the weather forecast and saw snow on the horizon, they'd smile, knowing that their very own snowstorm Christmas was the gift that kept on giving. Ah, here we go. Another story, but this one's a bit of a heartwarmer. You see, in 2019, in the little town of Springwood, there was a reunion that was nothing short of magical. Now, this wasn't your typical holiday reunion with friends or distant relatives. No. This one was something special. It all began with Ellen and Tom, two sweethearts, who many years ago were inseparable. Back in high school, they were the talk of the town, always together, always smiling. But life, as it sometimes does, took them down separate paths. Time passed, they grew older, and eventually they lost touch, though neither one ever forgot the other. Then one day, out of the blue, Ellen got a letter, and let me tell you, she was as surprised as a snowman in July. It was from Tom after all these years, telling her he'd never really stopped thinking about her and that he wanted to meet up again. Well, after a few moments of hesitation, Ellen knew in her heart she had to go. So on Christmas Eve, they agreed to meet at the old diner, the very place they'd met all those years ago. The air was crisp, the snow gently falling outside, and the twinkling lights made everything feel just a bit more magical. And there they were, both a little older, a little wiser, but the same spark in their eyes. When Tom walked through that door, Ellen's heart skipped a beat. It felt like no time had passed at all. The years melted away and they just fell right back into their old rhythm, laughing, reminiscing, and talking as though they'd never been apart. They spent hours catching up, sharing stories of their lives, and as the night wore on, it was clear as a bell. They hadn't just met again. They had found each other again, and under the glow of Christmas lights, something beautiful happened. They realized that the love they'd once shared hadn't faded. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to bloom once more. Now, isn't that a story to warm your heart? A reunion after a lifetime, right in time for Christmas. It just goes to show, my friend, that sometimes the best gifts come not in the form of ribbons and bows, but in the form of love that's been patiently waiting for the perfect moment to be rediscovered. Ah, yes, Christmas always has a way of making the impossible possible, doesn't it? Oh, I've got another one for you, my friend, and this one is truly something special. It's the story of the long-lost letter from 2011, a tale about rediscovery, surprise, and the true spirit of Christmas. Now, let me set the scene for you. It's Christmas Eve, and in a little town called Willowbrook, a woman named Claire is sitting by the fire, enjoying a peaceful evening. The house is filled with the smell of freshly baked cookies, and outside the snow is gently falling, blanketing everything in white. She's just finishing up some last-minute holiday preparations when out of nowhere, she finds an old box in the attic, something she hasn't seen in years. Curious, she dusts it off and opens it up, and inside there's a stack of letters, old ones, yellowed with time, tied together with a ribbon. As she flips through them, a particular letter catches her eye, one she hadn't thought about in a long time. It's addressed to her, written by her grandmother, who had passed away several years before. But the letter isn't something Claire had ever received. It was dated December 25th, 1973, and it was marked with the words, "For Claire, when the time is right." Now, Claire's heart starts to race. She can't remember ever seeing this letter, and she certainly had no idea what it might say. She carefully unties the ribbon and unfolds the paper. The letter, written in her grandmother's elegant handwriting, begins with the usual warm, loving words, but then it takes a turn. Her grandmother writes about a special Christmas memory, one that Claire had forgotten. It was about a Christmas when Claire was just a little girl, and her grandmother had hidden a gift in plain sight, hoping to surprise her. But for some reason, the gift never made it to Claire that year, and the letter explains why. Her grandmother had written, "I wanted you to have this when you were older, to remind you that the greatest gifts aren't always the ones we expect. Sometimes they come years later when we're ready to appreciate them." As Claire reads, she can feel the warmth of her grandmother's love surrounding her. The letter isn't just a note, it's a gift in itself, one filled with wisdom and memories that Claire didn't realize she needed to hear. The letter ends with one final message. The gift is waiting for you. You'll know it when you find it. At that moment, Claire realizes something. She's been holding on to that memory for years without even knowing it. The true gift her grandmother had wanted to give her wasn't a material thing. It was the reminder that the most meaningful things in life often take time to reveal themselves. It wasn't just the discovery of an old letter, but the rediscovery of love, connection, and the deep understanding that Christmas isn't just about the presents we open. It's about the moments we share, the people we cherish, and the memories that stay with us forever. And so, Claire kept that letter close, cherishing the reminder of her grandmother's wisdom That Christmas, she didn't need anything else. She already had the best gift she could ask for, the love of her family, and the knowledge that the most beautiful gifts often come when we least expect them. Now, isn't that a story to warm your heart and make you believe in the magic of Christmas all over again? Next one for you, the Secret Santa of Kansas City in 2008. Well, this one's just as heartwarming, with a dash of mystery that'll make you believe in the magic of Christmas all over again. It was the holiday season of 2008, and Kansas City was bustling with its usual Christmas cheer. The streets were lined with sparkling lights, and the smell of hot cocoa and freshly baked cookies filled the air. But in the midst of all the holiday excitement, something special was happening that no one could quite explain. It all began with a man named Jack, who worked as a delivery driver for a small local company. Jack wasn't rich. He was just an average guy, working hard to make ends meet. Christmas was always a bit of a struggle for him, trying to stretch his paycheck to buy presents for his family. But that year, something felt different. He wanted to do something special, something that would make a real difference. So Jack decided to become a Secret Santa, not just for one person, but for as many people as he could. He wasn't going to tell anyone, not even his family, about his plan. He'd take a little bit of his earnings and buy gifts, leaving them anonymously on doorsteps around Kansas City. He started small. One morning, he left a warm blanket on the doorstep of a young single mother who lived nearby. The note simply read, "May this Christmas bring warmth and comfort to you and your little one." The next day, it was a box of toys left at the door of a local orphanage. The day after that, a basket of holiday treats for an elderly couple who had no family nearby. Jack didn't want credit for it. He just wanted to spread a little holiday cheer. But here's the twist. Jack's gifts didn't just stop at a few random acts of kindness. Word began to spread. People started to notice. More gifts started appearing in the most unexpected places, on the doorsteps of strangers, in the hands of people who least expected it, all wrapped up with care and love. It wasn't just Jack anymore. The whole town seemed to be joining in. The Secret Santa phenomenon took off, and suddenly everyone wanted to give. It wasn't long before the city was buzzing with stories of this mysterious Santa. No one knew who was behind it, but everyone felt the love. People were helping their neighbors, donating to charities, and offering support to those in need. There was a sense of community that hadn't been felt in years. And then, on Christmas Eve, Jack's final act came, a massive surprise to the community. The local food bank had been struggling that year, and Jack, along with a few others, made sure that families in need had all of the food they could ever want for the holiday. Trucks full of food showed up at homes across the city with cards that read, "A little something to brighten your Christmas." The magic of that Christmas wasn't in the gifts or the decorations. It was in the way Kansas City came together. Jack, the original Secret Santa, had inspired a movement, a reminder that Christmas isn't about how much you spend or what you get. It's about the love you share and the kindness you spread. So, every year since, the people of Kansas City remember the Secret Santa of 2008, and they carry on the tradition of giving, keeping the spirit of kindness alive for everyone. And Jack? Well, he never sought recognition. For him, the true joy was in knowing that his small acts of kindness had sparked something beautiful that would last for years to come. Ah, I've got a couple more gems for you. The Santa's Helper Mystery from 1992 and The Surprise Santa Visit from the 1990s. These two stories, though different, are both filled with the kind of Christmas magic and mystery that make this time of year so special. So, let's dive in, shall we? First, let's start with The Santa's Helper Mystery of 1992. Now, this one takes place in a little town called Maplewood, where Christmas was always a big deal. The entire town would gather together for the annual Christmas parade, where Santa would make his grand entrance on the back of a shiny red fire truck. It was always the highlight of the season, and everyone was looking forward to it that year, especially a young girl named Emma. Emma loved Christmas more than anything, and she always dreamed of helping Santa in some way. So, one day, she decided to sneak into the local community center to see if she could find out who was going to be playing Santa that year. She knew that someone must have been hired to take on the jolly role, and she was determined to discover who it was. As she peeked around the corner, she saw a man in a red suit, looking very much like Santa, sitting with a group of volunteers. But something was off. His beard was too short, his boots didn't shine, and his voice wasn't quite as deep as she expected. Emma, always the curious one, decided to investigate further. She followed the man after the meeting, keeping her distance, and soon discovered something truly strange. The man had no reindeer, no sleigh, and no North Pole address. The mystery only deepened when Emma overheard a conversation that revealed this Santa wasn't the real deal at all. He was someone hired to play the part, but he didn't know the first thing about Christmas traditions. So, Emma and her friends banded together to create the perfect surprise. They quickly fixed the man's costume, helped him with his lines, and even set up a surprise sleigh ride, making sure he had all the festive cheer he needed. When the parade finally rolled around, the real magic happened. Emma and her friends revealed their secret plan, and the community watched in awe as the mystery Santa took his place, complete with reindeer and all. The crowd cheered, and Emma smiled, knowing she had helped create a bit of Christmas magic for the entire town. Now, moving on to The Surprise Santa Visit of the 1990s. This one takes place a few years after Emma's adventure, and it's all about spreading joy when it's least expected. It was a cold December evening, and a little boy named Timmy was feeling down. His parents had recently lost their jobs, and there was no money for presents that year. Timmy had written his Christmas letter, as all children do, but deep down, he didn't expect anything. He was just hoping for peace and happiness for his family. On Christmas Eve, something unexpected happened. As Timmy lay in bed, listening to the sound of the wind howling outside, he heard the familiar sound of footsteps on the roof. He thought it was just his imagination at first, but then he heard a jolly ho, 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 followed by a soft knock on the door. When Timmy's parents opened it, they were greeted by none other than Santa Claus himself. Well, at least a very convincing version of him. Santa, with his twinkling eyes and rosy cheeks, entered the home with a sack full of gifts. Timmy was absolutely amazed. He could hardly believe his eyes. Santa didn't just bring presents for Timmy. He brought enough to make sure everyone in the family had something special that year. There were toys for Timmy, cozy blankets for his parents, and even a few bags of groceries to ease the financial strain. Timmy's parents were in shock, but Santa simply winked and said, "It's not about what's under the tree. It's about what's in your hearts." Before they could say another word, Santa was gone, just as quickly and mysteriously as he had arrived. The family sat in silence for a moment, unsure whether they had imagined it all. But the gifts were real, and so was the magic that filled their home that Christmas Eve. It was a reminder that sometimes the best gifts aren't wrapped up in shiny paper, but are the acts of kindness that come when you least expect them. And there you have it. These tales of Christmas mysteries remind us of the power of kindness, surprise, and the magic of the season. Whether it's helping out an unsuspecting Santa or receiving an unexpected visit from one, these stories are a testament to the spirit of Christmas and how it can turn even the most ordinary moments into something extraordinary. So, my friend, remember, you never know when a little Christmas magic might find its way to you just when you need it most. Let's finish with two tales that couldn't be more different, but still carry that holiday wonder, one with a bit of fright and one with a touch of mystery. First, let's talk about Krampus Night in Austria, and then we'll unravel the Christmas lights mystery of 2014. It was a cold December evening in a small alpine village in Austria, the kind where snow piled high on the rooftops and every house had a glowing candle in the window. The date? December 5th, Krampusnacht, the night when St. Nicholas makes his rounds to reward the good children and his sinister companion Krampus punishes the naughty ones. Now, this isn't a story for the faint of heart, but it's one that locals tell every year to remind children to be on their best behavior. The star of this tale is a young boy named Lucas, who was notorious for playing tricks on his neighbors. One year, he broke Frau Huber's fence. The next, he hid Herr Schmidt's firewood. But this year, Lucas took things too far. He snuck into the town square and stole the chocolates meant for the children on St. Nicholas Day. As night fell, the townsfolk gathered for their Krampusnacht festivities, dressed in their terrifying masks and ringing their heavy bells. The firelight flickered as they paraded through the streets, but Lucas wasn't worried. He sat at home, smugly eating the stolen chocolates, convinced that Krampus was just a story. But as the clock struck midnight, Lucas heard something outside his window, chains rattling and a deep, guttural growl. At first, he thought it was just the townsfolk playing tricks, but then the door creaked open, and there stood a towering figure with horns, cloven hooves, and glowing red eyes. Krampus didn't say a word. He simply pointed a long, bony finger at Lucas, who was frozen with fear. The boy quickly confessed everything, stealing the chocolates, breaking the fence, and all his other mischiefs. Krampus didn't take him away that night, but he left behind a switch with a note tied to it. Be good, or next year it won't just be a warning. Lucas was never the same after that. He became the kindest, most generous boy in the village, and to this day, people in that little alpine town say that if you listen carefully on Krampusnacht, you can still hear the sound of chains rattling in the snow. Now let's turn to something a little lighter, shall we? It's a story from 2014 about the magic of Christmas lights, and it begins in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Wisconsin. The Johnson family was known for their extravagant Christmas light displays. Every year they'd string up thousands of twinkling lights, synchronized to music that played on a special radio frequency. But in 2014, something strange happened. One chilly December evening, the Johnsons flipped the switch to light up their display, but instead of their usual cheerful show, the lights began blinking in strange patterns, patterns that no one had programmed. At first, they thought it was a technical glitch, but then the lights started spelling out words: hope, love, joy. The messages changed every few minutes, and neighbors began to gather in front of the house, trying to figure out what was going on. The Johnsons insisted they hadn't done anything different that year, and the control box for the lights showed no signs of tampering. As the days went by, the messages became more personal. One night, the lights spelled out, "Tom, call your mom." A man in the crowd gasped. It was directed at him. Another night it said, "Thank you, Dr. Klein." A local doctor in the audience wiped away tears, overwhelmed by the gratitude. Word spread quickly, and people came from miles around to see the miraculous lights. The messages continued every night until Christmas Eve, when they stopped completely. The final message simply read, "Merry Christmas to all." To this day, no one knows how it happened. Some say it was a Christmas miracle, while others think it was a tech-savvy prankster with a good heart. But the Johnsons believed it was something more, a reminder that Christmas is about connection, gratitude, and the magic of believing in something bigger than ourselves. And there you have it, two very different stories to finish off on, both capturing the spirit of the season. One to remind us to stay on the nice list, and the other to show us that the holidays are full of surprises and wonder. May your own Christmas be just as magical, my friend. Merry Christmas.